Jordan Romano.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't speak on him yesterday because I was wanting to save the conversation for you. I saw some of the discourse. I thought it was kind of insane. But for the most part, people get this, right? His arm is not healthy. They waited as long as they possibly could to gather as much information as they possibly could.
Mm-hmm.
But there was kind of this weird sentiment that he was done. They did wrong by him in some way. But to me, this is professional sports.
Of course it is. And listen, if there was any path to him, like any path to them believing that he could come back and be anything close to 100%, they gave Chad Green like a guaranteed, granted, it was only a 1-year deal and there was like a bunch of options and it was a very creative contract, but he was coming off Tommy John surgery. There was no guarantee he was going to return to being the same dude, but they knew at the highest of highs, that's a guy that they wanted in their bullpen.
Well, actually, that's a great point because they didn't just do that with him. They had Kirby Yates as well.
Yes, and he did not, notably.
So it's not as though these guys are, hey, you've got to be 100% healthy to get out here and pitch for us. They have shown that they are pretty risky when it comes to some of these high upside, high leverage arms that have injury history. But Romano basically missed the entire season last year. And it was kind of one of those, I think, underrated stories in the season was he was just away for a very, very long time. And people went, oh, he'll be back eventually. And then again, they waited until the very last possible minute to see how the arm would respond. I had Ben Nicholson-Smith on, I want to say a month and a half before this happened, and he outlined this in great detail. And then basically like 2 days before, people were going, did you know this was a possibility? The reporting had been done. This was something that they were monitoring very, very closely. And I thought it was kind of strange that a lot of the reaction was like, how could you let this guy go when you're so desperate for bullpen arms? It's like, no, you needed to let him go because you need to use the $7 million on like usable bullpen arms. You don't have the luxury of spending $7 million on a guy who can't pitch for you.
No, and if there was a path to them truly believing that he was going to pitch, remember there was also like that moment at the end of the season, it's like, we're going to see him pitch. He's coming back to the major leagues. And he never did.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And by all accounts, like still not throwing at his home in Florida. So yeah, like if there was a path, if they truly looked at the medicals, if they looked at the injury, which is like still unclear to me exactly what it was. It's not like Tommy John surgery, but it's an elbow injury of some kind. If they thought, that guy could help their bullpen, and there could be a check mark on part of their offseason shopping list for the area of the team that is in most need of improvement, they would have taken it.
Yeah, clearly.
Pretty obviously. And I'm not saying that they might be wrong. Like, it's very possible that they're wrong. But yeah, they would love to have brought back a great reliever, Canadian, who's already in-house, that they could bring back on a 1-year deal, even if it's avoiding arbitration or going to arbitration with him. And I don't think he can pitch anymore in the major leagues of baseball and be an effective reliever.
Yeah. To me, this wasn't overly complicated, I guess. I just thought that for whatever reason, some of the stories seemed to be framed in a way that was like the Blue Jays weren't upfront with him or weren't they left it, like them leaving it to the last minute was in some way detrimental to Jordan Romano, when in reality it's like, no, I think that's
the entire offseason. He's now a free agent. Like
there's no one has signed. He can go anywhere he wants.
Yeah.
And anyway, so okay, we're on the same page when it comes to this. But it kind of got me thinking about a couple of secondary parts with this. So Romano gone, the bullpen needs a ton of work, right? It's basically just Chad Green.
Yeah. And Eric Swanson, who was better when he came back.
Okay. Sure.
But yeah, I mean, they brought him back. They obviously made the same, they did the same accounting with Eric Swanson, and they were like...
So for way less money.
Yeah, for way less money.
It's
and they did
like, I think it was like a $6 million difference.
Yeah, I think he's making like 3 something.
Oh, is it that high? I thought it was a little bit lower than that. I thought it was like 2.
Anyways, and also like they did factually give up a guy that's now wearing a World Series ring, and like the guys that were happy to have him, want to bring him back.
Sure.
They gave him up for Eric Swanson.
Yeah.
And Adam Macko, but like also like Eric Swanson.
Yeah, so. Adam Macko, TBD. Like we'll see.
You don't know.
He was hurt last year too, right?
Yeah, but he came back. He pitched by the end of the season. He was healthy by the end of the year, and I think had a decent year.
So my question to you is, what is Jordan Romano's legacy?
He's a guy what I said last Friday when I spoke about it, when it seemed pretty clear.
Oh, well,
that
then never mind. You know what? Hey, forget it. Forget the segment. Ben already did it. He said it last Friday, so everyone just go listen to that. That's great.
No, I need to say, because people were mad that I didn't mention it yesterday.
People or one tweet?
Yeah, one tweet.
Yeah, okay.
As a
Thanks.
person.
Yeah, okay, sure.
There were some likes on it, though, too.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, anyways, continue.
Criminally underrated.
Yeah.
His most notable moment is clearly being on the mound for Game 2 against the Mariners, where, he gave up the hits, but so much duck snorting and so much defensive miscuing behind him. And he was asked to get 6 outs when the rest of the bullpen had already imploded before that. Mm-hmm. That's his most notable moment. Like, he's not going to be remembered as, like, the great closer of Blue Jays history. He is up there among the franchise leaders. He's third in all-time saves in the history of the franchise. And one more than Roberto Osuna. So it's good to get into bronze medal position there. That's an important position to be in.
Yeah, it's nice to bump Osuna down less.
It is nice. Yeah. But yeah, a guy that I think if you ask most Blue Jays fans who watched him be the closer for the near half decade that he was, and kind of emerging in the strike, or not the strike, the COVID year of 2020, where it was like Kevin Biggio was this team's best hitter for a prolonged period of time, and Jordan Romano looked like the best reliever in baseball for a period of time. But he was the full-time closer in a full season from 21 to 23. Criminally underrated. 4th most saves in the major leagues over that span. And he only had 11 blown saves, which is one more than Josh Hader had over that span, and pitching more games and more innings than Josh Hader, right? So, like, criminally underrated, because you think of him as a guy that always had traffic on the base paths. It was never a clean outing when Jordan Romano went out there. He got the job done.
He sure did. He did make you sweat, though, and that is something that I will think about always with him. And I'm not saying that is a like necessarily bad thing. But when I do think about him and what his legacy is, when I close my eyes and I think about Romano, it's going to be that, like, he came out and he walked, he got a leadoff walk and then a bloop single and then 2 strikeouts and a pop out, and that was the save.
That's the life of the reliever, right? Like, you want a guy that doesn't put the ball in play, and sometimes that results in searching for the strikeout at the expense of maybe walking a guy. And, like, sometimes he was an interesting dude because he was a 2-pitch pitcher. Sometimes it was, he's throwing 99, 100. It's the fastball. He's just going to blow people away. Sometimes it's just like slider after slider after slider after slider after slider because he felt more comfortable because that is such a wipeout pitch. But no, criminally underrated. A great reliever over that span, partly because the Blue Jays had no success over that period of time that he will not be viewed in that light. But yeah, and a pretty great intro when he came into the game, when they did the renovations with the red stuff.
To me, when you think about the renovations to the Rogers Center, and when you think about being at the ballpark, him coming out with the red was, it's going to be a thing that I remember. So it's definitely part of his legacy. I think you touched on a lot of good stuff there. One is, to me, is I will kind of remember that. It's like the only big game that he ever pitched that's like a real memory is him blowing it to Seattle.
Correct.
So that goes.
Is he the first guy you think of, though, when you think about that blown lead? Because I think about even with relievers. I think of Tim Meza and Carlos Santana.
No, I do think about him. I think about really a couple things. One was just the timing of the lift, right? Like going to the bullpen in that spot and wondering if that was the right move at the time, and then it immediately turning out to not be the right move. I think about, obviously, Springer and Bichette crashing into one another, because that's kind of the picture of the blown loss, right? That's in my mind's eye. I can see it developing, and I can actually remember being at my ex-girlfriend's place where I had probably promised to do something that I wasn't doing, and I remember being like, "This game's a blowout, so we're actually going to be able to get." Because you and I were supposed to come in.
Right.
We had some kind of weird schedule where
extra
if the Jays,
pre-game show or something, if there was a game 3.
Anyway, I thought we were going to basically be completely off the hook that we were going to have to go work because it was going to extend the next game. I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, I got to get this day. And all of a sudden the game starts collapsing and I'm watching it with horror going, surely it can't happen this way. And it did. So I do think about him with that. And I do feel as though you're right. He was underrated, but then right as soon as it seemed as though he was becoming properly appreciated is when things started to fall apart with the injuries. And if you recall, even the season prior, like how many of those blown saves happened right before the injury that preceded this?
Yeah.
Like he had his moment, and it started to kind of dissipate right as people started to really care about the guy.
Yeah. Do you think there were people that were coming around to it? Because I still feel like even by the end,
coming around to it,
to him being the fourth, like I think if you polled most people and you're like, how good was Jordan Romano when he was the Blue Jays closer? But like in comparison to the other closers of his generation, was he? I think people would be surprised to find out that he had the fourth most saves over that span, and he had like there are numbers to suggest he was better than Josh Hader over those 3 years that he was the Blue Jays closer. And I think most people have kind of made up their mind on that because he wasn't Mariano Rivera. But that's the thing about Mariano Rivera or regular season Emmanuel Clase.
Yeah.
It's like those guys,
regular season Emmanuel Clase.
They're those guys.
Handful of rings and awards for things that I didn't know existed.
Those guys are the freaks. Yeah. It's very difficult to have a guy come out of those bullpen doors and feel 100% confident, which Cleveland did until, the calendar flipped to October.
I don't think he's as underrated as you think.
Okay, so maybe I have a different perception of it.
My perception of it was always that he was pretty properly appreciated. I think that just like some of the issue with it is when you are the closer, there's always a higher level of accountability. So when you do have the traffic, right, and you have the sweaty outs, I don't think that people feel the same confidence in you. And again, as he started to get the lights, the team started to struggle.
Yeah.
There were fewer fewer save opportunities for that guy.
Yeah.
They weren't the same team. And sometimes they'd be putting the lights on when the Jays were getting blown out. They hadn't won in 3 straight games. And you're going, here's the lights. Here comes Romano just because he needs to pitch. He's got to get an inning or two in. And then, the injuries started to happen in the last couple of seasons, and he was sort of absent from a couple of the more struggle seasons that the Blue Jays have had in basically the last decade.
I will also think of him, he might be, and recency bias is part of this.
But that's what, dude, we don't mention this enough, that recency bias affects legacies a lot.
Yeah. He's, right now, if you ask me to name one Toronto athlete who was a cigarette smoker, I would say Jordan Romano. And I might have said Sergei Berezin before that, I think. I think he's at the top of the pile when it comes to...
It was a great photo.
Yeah.
Really is a great photo.
Baseball...
I think that endeared him to a lot of people.
Yeah. I think he's the number one cigarette-smoking Toronto athlete.
I don't know if he's a cigarette smoker or if he just had a cigarette. There's a pretty big difference, but yeah.
I guess we're parsing. It didn't look like it was his first.
Sure, but do you consider your wife a cigarette smoker?
No.
And yet?
She has. Okay, so that's a different scenario.
That's what I'm
don't
saying.
You think?
No, that's not. He was just did you see him smoking multiple times?
No. Yeah. So would you guess that?
I like how you're like he looked comfortable with a cigarette, as though there's like a real way. Like he'd be just holding it up between his thumb and his index finger.
Yeah.
Like, is this how you do it? Like holding it like a torch, like his victory celebration.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's really not that hard. You don't need a lot of practice to look like a cigarette smoker.
But I would say the baseball of all of the North American pro sports, part of it is like the lack of cardiovascular activity that it entails.
No doubt.
And also like the prevalence of just tobacco in the culture as far as like chewing tobacco. Yeah, dip. Like there's more than a few cigarette smokers in the history of Major League Baseball.
I would like to inform you right now that there are a lot more athletes than you probably believe who have the odds cigarette across all professional sports.
Right. And that's different, as we said,
I
than
just
being a cigarette smoker.
I just watched Taylor Lewan talk about his addiction to cigarettes throughout his first 2 seasons in the NFL. Yeah. That's an NFL offensive tackle, so it's like cardiovascular stuff. No, he's
Guy Lafleur, notorious.
But you're going far back.
Yeah,
I'm saying now,
vintage,
recently, a lot of guys will have a drink and a smoke. That's not a completely foreign idea. Anyways, to me, the second layer of this is that, yes, he is Canadian. That's why he got the red lights. That's why he had,
But sometimes we do this with Canadians where we overly hype them because they're not necessarily deserving of it.
This is where I'm going with it, is that often, for a long time, we had a lot of bad teams. And so and there were far fewer Canadian athletes in professional sports, like specifically basketball, right? Mm-hmm. We went from having Bill Wennington and Rick Fox as the guys to now a league where you cannot watch a basketball game essentially without going, yeah, that guy's Canadian and he's in the rotation. He's really good. Oh, one of the best guys in the NBA is Canadian, and his, one of his counterparts is also Canadian on the team, right?
Yeah.
You used to be I think reluctant to feel great about the Canadian players because you would wonder if they were being targeted simply because of their passport and the idea that they would come play in a place simply because they like just because they were Canadian. Hey, they might actually like it here. They won't struggle as much with the customs and the lifestyle changes. And yeah, there was a sense to kind of overhype them as organizations to go obviously not included with hockey, but in baseball and basketball specifically, to me, there is a little bit of you get your back up as a true older sports fan when you see someone is Canadian because you don't want it to really be any part of the equation as to why a guy is where he is.
Right. Yeah, and baseball, it seemed like it was at the cutting edge of Canadians dominating the sport before. Like the NBA now, like outside of obviously hockey.
Yeah, they had more dominant ones, but there's like more Canadians now, right? Like the Cleveland Guardians.
Yep.
It's so hard for me to say Guardians.
Yep.
It's just, I got to say it every time where I'm like, I pause. I'm like, wait, Guardians. They got 3 guys in their bullpen that were Canadians and then 2 guys on the roster.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. But like I said, Jordan Romano is deserving of just the overall acceptance and love and appreciation for what he did over a 3-year span, which seems like not that much, but that's the life of a major league pitcher, not just a reliever, but a reliever especially. Like lots of guys flame out because they're trying to throw 100 miles an hour and the human body's not supposed to do that. The other thing I think about with Romano, and this is true of a lot of closers.
But I want is this a strong departure from the Canadian thing? Because I have follow-up to the Canadian thing.
I don't know if it's, I was just going to say the way he was a psycho, like the way he looked like a psycho.
Okay, yeah. The look. Okay.
In the dugout, or sorry, in the bullpen, like in the 3rd inning, right? Where he'd be stalking around the bullpen mound, like looking nuts. He's a normal dude. Like he's actually a really affable guy if you've ever gotten a chance to talk to him.
I have.
He looks like a nut, crazy nut when he's on the mound, but like before he gets on the mound, which I appreciate.
Nice guy. He's involved in the community.
Oh yeah,
like
dumping the water on his head. Like, and you got to be that. Like he did, he went full closer. When you have to do that.
So my follow-up with you on the Canadian thing was, where do you rank him amongst the greatest Canadians who have played for the Blue Jays? Because I think it's actually kind of tough to parse through 3 guys in particular.
Okay, so the first guy, like Russell Martin feels like the best.
I agree, but also it's like a lot of success. But if you really look at it, it's like Russ had 1 really good season. Romano had more good seasons by his position, right? So it's hard to kind of pick between those 2 things.
Yeah, but it's the playoff stuff, though.
I agree. So, but Russell Martin... Yeah, I'm just saying that I agree with you that it is Russell Martin, but to me, it's actually closer to and then the third to me is Quantrill. And if you look at it, dude, this. You want to talk about underrated?
Yeah.
From 97 to 2001.
Yeah.
He had a 3.05 ERA in almost 400 innings.
Yeah. No, he's great.
Like, it's again not quite him, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough when you're talking about like a middle reliever, though.
That's what I'm saying. I agree. So I agree. I'm just saying when I saw that, when I was looking at it and looking this up and trying to quantify all the guys, and I was going down the Brett Laurie rabbit hole being like, is there a case?
There's nobody that's been more hyped. And I mean, you want to talk about
the most hyped Canadian, I would say, is even more than Russell Martin arriving here was Brett Laurie.
Yeah.
Brett Laurie, from day one, it was this guy's the future of the franchise, and he's Canadian.
And they traded him for an MVP too, right? Like so.
Well, I don't really care. I mean, I obviously care about that part, but in terms of his legacy, I never count a guy going, and you got this back for him, so he's even better.
Honestly, if I was if you were going to force me to rank them, I would have Martin 1, and I think I would have Jordan Romano 2.
Yeah, and I think that's a part of the legacy.
If we're not including Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in there.
We're not.
Okay. But yeah, I would have him too. He's the 2nd greatest Canadian to ever wear the uniform.
If Vladdy ever decides to be like Canadian first and say, you know what, I'll play for Team Canada at a World Baseball Classic, then I will readjust the ranking.
I mean, if the Blue Jays, included that in their negotiation with him on an extension, like we'll sign you, we'll give you $400 million. Okay. You got it. Next time there's a World Baseball Classic, you're wearing the red and white. Yeah,
so I just think, hey, a pretty good legacy is to have the following things. It's just kind of my point with Romano, because it did seem to go out with a little bit of a whimper. The timing of it is, hey, lots of Leafs things are happening. People mostly just want to hear where Juan Soto signed, not what's going on with Jordan Romano. To me, most sensible Blue Jays fans did get a ramp up of, this guy might not actually be able to pitch. prepare yourselves. And then, but it was kind of out with a whimper. Hey, goodbye, Jordan Romano. And I just want to say that for having multiple seasons as one of the best 5 closers in all of baseball, being the second best Canadian to ever pitch for the Toronto Blue Jays, having someone who had genuinely like a memorable entrance for anyone that went to a ball game, those are pretty important pieces to a quality legacy. I think the issue is the main thing, which you got to have postseason success with the Toronto Blue Jays right now, especially when the team is meant to be competitive, and that this is going to kind of diminish the legacies of a lot of these guys, where you look at dudes like Marcus Semien and Teoscar Hernandez who went other places to win, and it was kind of a reminder of the failures of a really talented group that didn't get it done. And I don't think Romano will be celebrated the same way just because he's going to be attached with one of the more disappointing eras of Blue Jays baseball. And I really believe that is what this is. Like, I don't care what you say about the win totals for that time. It's like no one cares. There was a genuine moment in the summer where they were signing George Springer, where every guest we had on, all we were talking about was how many banners are the Blue Jays going to hang, because they have paired a big league budget with homegrown star talent and a deep farm system that was plus a smart front office that was going to be able to be the envy of the division, and it didn't last for 2 years.
Now you got me thinking about how we'll view Vladimir Guerrero Jr. if this plays out this season the way it very easily could. And the more you read about it, like if they don't figure out an extension with him, like they're just not going to trade him, which I don't think the Blue Jays should trade Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because I think they should just give him the check. But I certainly think if you're not going to give him the check, you shouldn't go into the season with him.
Totally agree.
But it feels like that's what they're going to do. And yeah, in a world of limitless possibilities, could they figure it out and make the playoffs and make a run or something, and like him re-sign here after that, I guess. But like the more likely scenario is they do that. They run themselves off a cliff here. Everybody's fired. They depart for nothing. And like what a punchline it will be, and how hurtful, how painful that'll be to Blue Jays fans to like even utter the name Vladimir Guerrero Jr., considering everything that he was and has produced. He would have
some cover, though. He would have some cover in the sense of people would blame the front office.
Of course.
And they would go, hey, these guys came to town and they left this place genuinely scorched earth.
Yeah.
Like we're Napoleon showing up to the Blue Jays games and we're like, oh no. How far is it to go back?
I don't think it's too extreme to talk about that being like just a franchise changer.
Buddy, I'm trying to get Jim Bowden on. He's busy this week. I think I'm going to have him next week, but he continues to put Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in mock trades.
I know, but his most recent reporting was that,
he thinks they'll go into the season with him.
Yeah.
But that ultimately... So I did a little spiel on this, how a lot of the calls around the Blue Jays or the information around the Blue Jays is not people sourcing within the organization, right? That within the organization, there's been a pretty strong cone of silence. They've done a damn good job at not necessarily hiding some of their intentions, because they have to meet with certain players publicly. So like it's going to get out, right? That they're actively pursuing Max Fried, that they're in on Santander, that they're really trying to pitch Soto, right? These things, you can't hide that. But overall, there's not a ton of noise coming out of them. There's not seemingly any dysfunction internally. There doesn't seem to be anybody leaking things to the Ben Nicholson Smiths of the world or to the top insiders. When you read everybody's insider report, it's always other executives around the league figure that they're under pressure. Other executives around the league figure that they have to make this move. Other executives around the league think that they could trade Vladdy. So I take it with a grain of salt. That being said, the Vladdy one, to me, there's just at least enough smoke that you could be a little concerned about it, because there's just no reason for him not to get a contract on this offseason. If that happens right now, you get the grace period because you go, nobody's signed, right? Like they've got plenty of time. Once the Juan Soto ink is dry, the clock is ticking on what the hell is happening with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Because to me, most people are working under the assumption that Bo Bichette's going into the season as a free agent.
Yeah, that makes all the sense.
And that it's going to be essentially, at best a 50-50 shot that he resigns?
Oh, yeah, that seems generous.
Right, but let's put it that way, that there's not a no chance.
But the idea that you could figure something out now, or that you could trade him for equitable value now, that would be that different at the deadline.
But if Vladdy goes into the season without a contract, you have to wonder what is happening. And also, the whole notion of, well, why not wait if it's because when does that work with great players?
Never.
When does that work with great players saying, hey, go up until you have the leverage of leaving town and the money goes up? This was smarter now to do it at the deadline. Like, no, it never is. And so, no, you're bang on. You're absolutely right to question that. And if I was them, if I was in their shoes, as painful as it would be, and as much as they have positioned themselves as we're trying to win and compete this offseason, if they can't get things done, and part of the reason is that free agents want to know what's going on with Vladdy and they can't answer that question, and then you strike out on guys and Vladdy goes, yeah, I'm not resigning. To me, if you don't even at least field the calls, that's negligence.
Yeah, it's malpractice.
Yeah.
It is because, yes, would the average Toronto Blue Jay fan be apoplectic if you traded Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? No doubt.
But you'd rather bring back a Michael King than have nothing.
By a factor of a quadrillion, it is so much worse to watch him walk out the door for something less at the deadline or, God forbid, like the compensation pick as a qualified free agent at the end of the season. Smart sports fans, which we more and more increasingly are because of the information we can absorb. And I think sports fans just in general are smarter now.
Yeah, you have way more access to games, to information. I think that to be a media member now, it takes a higher level of qualification in terms of the investment. There's just more. There's a lot of information that's out there. I think that's true.
Intellectually, those people can while it would hurt, like emotionally and
also,
karmically.
Sports aren't that hard to understand.
No,
like, we get it. We do it.
The good player getting nothing back for him is worse than getting a thing back.
I know. Like what we're saying here is really.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It's a pretty easy point. In this hand, I have nothing. In this hand, I have some things.
Yeah, it's like it's not the thing, but it's like you don't get to have that thing.
You get nothing.
Yeah, so like having I think that's an easier sell. Plus, like, will I be the biggest weather vane going from like, I like Vladdy at that position, that production, you can't afford to hitch your wagon to him to like, God, you got to give him everything. Will I go back to the guy that's like, he had 2 good seasons, like, come on, you could probably figure it out and spread the assets out.
But this is part of the reason why you actually have to give him everything.
Yeah.
Is that there's no other course you can take.
No. I don't know what it is.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
But you know why this has happened?
Why?
It's because they waited.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, but everybody else waits. Oh, wait, no, they don't. Like everybody else in Major League Baseball, even the Kansas City freaking Royals sign a guy that's way better than Vladimir Guerrero Jr.,
You know what I'd really like to know?
the long-term extension.
In all of this, and I know hindsight is 20/20, and I certainly, I'll put my hand up. I've had my Vladimir Guerrero Jr. doubts, right? Like who among us, right? Who among us hasn't had a quiet moment, or some of us loudly on the sports radio station sitting across from me for years about their question marks when it came to Vladdy? But much like we got the reporting on the Leaf stuff and how badly Dubas bungled all of those contracts where he could have signed Mitch Marner and then went, no. And then they went into the offseason. He signed Matthew anyway, and they completely screwed it up. And he ended up giving him a unbelievably unprecedented contract as an RFA who doesn't score goals, or not as many goals as the types of guys.
Well, I mean, Mikko Rantanen specifically.
So, but it was basically it was more. Like I think it was around $3+ million a season extra that it cost them for him not getting that contract done at the time. What I'd like to know is when Vladdy was doing after his dip season, the real song and dance of I want to be a Blue Jay, because he was pretty public in terms of this is where I want to be. This was the era of I'll never be a New York Yankee. He was trying to work out.
Sounded desperate, right? Exactly. It was a guy that did not sound. I know he's like the most confident guy in his abilities, but didn't sound like it. What would the number have
been then? And how bad was the botch job by them in terms of not signing him in that moment? Versus what it's going to cost now and the potential of watching him walk for nothing.
Dude, in that moment, if you had talked about a $300 million contract,
but this, exactly. But that's what I'm saying. I really do wonder what their real holdup was, why that didn't get done, and if what he was doing publicly matched at all what he was doing privately.
Yeah, I wonder. It's why we need my thing which is the greatest invention in the history of all pro sports and would benefit everybody if we did it, where you have the
kidnapping
capsule.
athletes and then making them tell their truth?
No. It's a feasible thing that you could do is
Celtic
record.
Pride style?
No, is you record every conversation, every trade conversation, every contract.
God, that's the worst idea I've ever heard.
But no, you have a time limit on it where it's like it goes in the capsule for 5 years, and then we're able to unearth it after 5 years and relive know exactly what went down there. But there's just no question there was a number that they could have come to. Like this, there's just no counter to it.
Yeah.
There is obviously a number somewhere along the line that would have made whatever number he might sign look like a joke, right? Like that number existed. And for whatever reason, I tend not to think it was him pushing these guys to a place that was just like totally unreasonable. I tend to think it was them more, honestly, on my side of the aisle, which is like, first baseman who did it once in a bunch of minor league parks. Like, I need to see more than a guy who's got like an 800 OPS playing. I know he's got a
Plus,
gold
they were
glove,
probably more confident about the
defense.
team that they were building at the time and the way that they might be able to spread the assets around.
No, you screwed up. Like, there's just, they're like,
you blew it.
It's over.
Yeah.
Like, whether they sign him or not, and they'll be able to save face a little bit if they sign him to like the $300+ million deal now.
Sure, but whatever it was then, it was you screwed it up.
Oh, yeah, a lot.
By the way, your time capsule thing, it exists.
What?
It's called texts and emails. And
sure,
so,
but being forced to like show it to the rest of us.
Yeah, it's worse. Anyway, that's a horrible. You just want to live in. You're so just down for 1984, right? Like film us at all times.
No,
and then years
in pro
later,
sports.
let us.
No, just in pro sports and just in contract and trade.
Part of what is fun is the conversation about what is happening.
We
and
can
what
still
could
have
happen.
this, but in 5 years we get to find out if we were right or wrong.
That's this. Okay, I can't believe you thought this was the best idea. This
is the best idea.
There's a billion different reasons that we don't even have time to dig into. Anyways, last thing on the Blue Jays before we take the break. Who's your number one dream guy out of all? Because let's take Soto out of this. Because are you still doing Soto in any part of you? Like, is there even 1% of you that believes Soto?
No, I mean, they're one of 5 teams that, according to reports, have offered him a contract. But yeah, no, it's not even. Like, I was there with Ohtani, as everybody was. Not even close. Like,
but I'm trying to even remove myself from that.
It makes no sense for so many different reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Not the least of which is like, okay, he's going to sign before Vlad, and then what? Like Vlad signs after, and like, and you outbid the richest owner in all of pro sports, and okay.
And Vlad plays with a guy who's going to be making hundreds of millions of dollars more than him.
Right? What?
Yeah.
I don't know. And you build the team. So what? Are you a team now that it competes with the Dodgers and Yankees as far as payroll? Because like there's still like I like Juan Soto.
Yeah.
Juan Soto does not a 100-win Blue Jays team make.
Yeah. So we've talked this out. We don't need to do this again.
No, that's not true. I didn't say that.
Okay.
But I would say
I haven't
that
done a lick of it for weeks because I don't. This isn't even. I'm not even doing the I don't want to get my hopes up to get hurt again thing because I do that all the time. I do that every day I wake up. Every day I wake up, I'm like, maybe things will be better. And then they're not.
No.
And it's fine because that's part of the human experience. You should get excited for things and then get disappointed. That's okay. That's okay. I'm just looking at this as rationally as I can and going, there's just no shot. It's just not happening. I don't care if you're getting meetings with him. You are the leverage team. No,
I mean, they did a thing that I never saw them actually do with Ohtani, which physically give him an offer, right? Like apparently that has happened. There's been I'm just telling you what happened. Anyways, no, the dream guy for me, I mean, it was Christian Walker because I was like, that guy's cheap. And like, I know he plays. Though. I get it. So what? Like all these guys, if you're going to go in those
I'm not giving up comp picks that are, I think it's a pretty high one for him.
Well, they're all the same. They're all the qualified free agents. So when we're talking about any of these guys, it's all a compensation pick. I've kind of moved off of him. And Santander, I know, applies to the thing I'm about to say about Corbin Burns, but Corbin Burns is my guy. Like, I've now moved entirely towards the thing that these guys obviously feel the most comfortable.
I'm glad we don't have the same guy.
Yeah, they're obviously the most comfortable evaluating pitching. And good job. Like, don't change the one thing you've been good at, evaluating free agent pitching. Good job. So do that again. Take the guy and Max Fried wasn't bad last year, but he took a step back and he's been hurt. Like 2 years ago, he was hurt for Atlanta. And I know you also want to stick it to Alex Anthopoulos, like that's part of it. But the rest of us, would enjoy watching the former division rival ace pitch for your team. Plus, I know it's not the same as the old days National League, American League thing, but this is a guy that went from the NL Central to the American League East in all these ballparks and Yankee Stadium and Fenway Park and Rogers Center and Camden Yards, which is different now that left field has been moved out. And he shoved, like had one of his best years of his entire career. He's a 30-year-old pitcher. I get it. And none of these look good, but yeah. And I know you need to score. I don't know if there is a single bat that changes your fortunes and turns you into this juggernaut offensively. So lean into the thing that you're good at. And Corbin Burns is my dude.
So I would like to take a lot of those arguments that you've just made, but apply them to Max Fried. Okay? He's been spectacular the last 3 seasons. And when we're talking about like taking a step back and the injuries, I'm whatever. This guy absolutely has a presence. He absolutely is someone that I would trust as the ace of your staff. I read a Fangraphs article the other day. Last year, you know who had allowed the least amount of doubles in all of baseball?
I would imagine it would be weird if it wasn't Max Fried.
It's Corbin Burns. No, no, it's Max Fried. It's Max Fried. It's Max Fried. There is a little bit of an element of taking a Braves guy back and just saying, hey, you know, this is kind of nice. But to me, Max Fried is the guy. If it was Corbin Burns, I wouldn't be completely upset about it.
Yeah.
But there's just something about Max Fried. And you look at his numbers, his pitch mix, all these different things. I just believe in what he's going to be throughout his early 30s more than I do with Corbin Burns. If they end up with either of them, though, I think you and I are kind of following the same logic here of I would rather invest in the starting pitcher, given what they have moving forward with their starting pitchers and the ages of some of these guys and the upside of some of these guys, to have a front-end dude for the next 3 seasons. Because here's what I know. The Blue Jays play great defense. They do. They've won 2 Team Gold Gloves back-to-back. I think that the path for them to return to what they were essentially 2 seasons ago, which maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought given what we saw last year, is far more on the table than them all of a sudden figuring out all of the bats, because such a huge... And this is such an annoying thing to say. Do I want them to go out and get sluggers? Duh. Do I want to see the Jays hit home runs? Of course. Like their offense has been putrid. The fact that they're bottom 5 in home runs back-to-back seasons in this ballpark in this division is genuinely inexcusable. It's actually, if you go across all of baseball and you try to find me the worst stats, it's like everything to do with the White Sox, they're all the worst ones. But the Blue Jays hitting no home runs in the AL East in back-to-back seasons when they're trying to compete for a World Series, I don't think that you're going to find too many more that are that inexcusable and that painful. That being said, if you want to compete and you actually want to win and you want to try to get into the playoffs next year, to me, the easiest path is to bulk up your pitching. And that starts with your starters. What takes a little bit of pressure off your bullpen? Having a guy like Max Fried at the head of your lineup. If you get that bounce back from Kevin Gausman, you get some version of what Bowden Francis was last season. You get Jose Barrios, who is Mr. Consistency in terms of just basically who he is. And then, to me, you kind of have to move off of Bassett. You got to find a trade partner for him. I brought this up to you before. I've actually asked, likes of Robert Murray, I've asked other insiders. They do say that that would be a guy that other organizations would covet and target, just from a money standpoint, not the play. It's just that's too much money in your starting pitching staff. You need to free some up for some other areas. To me, that's like your ideal outcome here, is that you're really upgrading your starting pitching, and then you're trying to still, I'm sorry to say it, but you're trying to piece together your bats in free agency with lower priority in free agency items.
Well, I follow all that logic. What's more likely? This is the way I did it. It's like, what's more likely that, and I get it, pitchers, one pitch and their season could be done, their careers could be over. But like, what's more likely? Corbin Burns or Max Fried produce to the level that you're accustomed to them producing for the length and breadth of their entire careers, or Anthony Santander turns into a pumpkin after hitting a career high in home runs with like a 16th percentile chase rate, right? At 30 years old.
Can I say something about that too?
What?
As much as I will get behind the Santander signing.
Yeah, sure.
Of course, right? Like, I would like to say, if it happens, I will be there 100% behind it, giving you all the optimistic and positive reasons to believe in Santander. But it will kind of piss me off more about the Teoscar thing if they like, we're getting Santander.
Switch hitting Teoscar.
Yeah, like we're just going out and paying Teoscar even more money. Like this is just, sorry, what? We already had Teoscar at home. Why are we leaving to go get different Teoscar?
And if we're going to kill them for not getting the Vlad contract done, imagine how cheaply they could have extended Teoscar Hernandez at the time instead of trading him. Like, if he was willing to talk,
it just reminds me very much of the Kendrys Morales thing where they were like, we don't need you, Edwin. And then he went on and he was good. And then they went, don't worry, we'll get Kendrys. And then he was bad.
Yeah.
It has that feel to me a little bit is all I'm saying. And so part of me is guarded against it. And some of the things you mentioned I believe in.
They
also,
have a
what
very
happens to the Blue Jay
profile.
killer when he doesn't get to play the Blue Jays?
That's a good question. he was an everything killer last year.
Yeah,
But
he was.
He had like a 306 on base, which is fine if you're hitting 40, do 2 home runs or whatever.
Yeah.
But is there a world where like the balls don't go out of the
there's a world.
ballpark
Yeah,
at
there's a
like
world.
exactly the same rate? And you're like, oh, this is a guy with like a 700 OPS who's not helping you if he's not hitting home runs. And he's making how much for how much longer?
That's it.
Oh, and yes, Corbin Burns, God, when you're talking about 5+ years for a pitcher, of course, could look bad. But I trust that guy and his track record more than I do Anthony Santander. No offense. Or offense. I don't know. It's fine. You make hundreds of millions of dollars. You'll be fine.
And if it's anyone who is offended, as Conor, actually, you can't say Conor McGregor stuff anymore.
Yeah.
He's done.
Yeah.
But I do like the line, I apologize for absolutely nothing. So I'm like, I got to decide if I'm going to keep that one.